Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Move with Love podcast. I am April Miranda, your host, healer, and guide. And today we have Xavi de Guzman, who brings to the world so many talents as an actor, as a screenwriter, as a charity founder, and now author of the world children's book called Peeled Fruit. He was raised in Toronto and now residing in Vancouver as he has been an ABC's Take Two designated survivor and CW's The 100. The series come off the Jo Koy lead Filipino comedy film Easter Sunday, as well as the Emmy nominated Netflix Maid, starring Margaret, Qualley, and Nick Robinson. But it was his time off from the films that he decided to explore a memory he holds dearly, his mother peeling fruit for him as a child. Please welcome to the show, Xavi de Guzman.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for being here. So let's just get right into it. Please share your story and maybe three turning points in your life that have brought you to where you are today.
It's that's I've been exploring this question like in this past week, um, because I don't know what exactly led me here. Um, it's been a wild ride, and I always try to think about if things went differently, would I have ended up in the same place? For example, if I stayed with my high school girlfriend, would I have still ended up here? If I had not done Thai boxing or went to Thailand, would I have still ended up here? Um, and there's always formative moments I found, but I'd say recently or most recently, the things that I would say have really impacted where I am is going to Vancouver when I did because that led me to get my first series regular show. Um, and then more recently, I had a separation from, I was engaged for a bit, and then that ended, unfortunately, but it was for the better. Um, she tried getting $30,000 out of me for God knows what. And then this was a very recent conversation that I had with my therapist was to remind myself of my wins, of my big wins. Um, because just through that separation and it really made me, I guess, just doubt myself and life and what my purpose was and stuff like that. And over the past month, it was a really good month. And I was terrified because of how good it was going. And I was just like, all my mind was thinking about is when the rug would get pulled from under me. And my therapist just told me to sit in your wins and to understand that you are capable. And if things did unfortunately get pulled from under me, you're also capable of bouncing back from that. And I have the track record to prove it. And so being more mindful of those wins because like every time we want to be in a situation where we have to talk about ourselves, we always want to approach it humbly. It's like, oh well, it's I'm just a vessel and this, but yes, at the same time, you are the vessel, and to know that you are capable of the great things that you put your mind to, and as shown by what I've done in the past, it's like, yeah, I guess I am capable.
Yes, you are. So tell me, tell me five wins. Tell me five wins to where we can see you,
Yeah.
celebrate you.
Um, the first one is being a Muay Thai champion. That's kind of what like set me on the trajectory of getting into stunts and things like that. So I fought on Team Canada and I was one of the faces for Muay Thai in Canada in general because back then Muay Thai was still a new sport and not a lot of schools, not a lot of fighters even went back to Thailand to actually learn it how it's meant to be taught and learned. And then from there, getting into acting, and then getting to the point where I had my first series regular and getting on a show that was Emmy nominated. And then being in LA for my first feature film that was being premiered at, not my first feature, but my first feature that was being premiered at the Chinese theater. And then at the same time, having billboards for my Emmy nominated show out there. It's like, that was surreal. And then
Mhm.
it led me to start the charity, Play On Foundation, which focuses on raising funds and awareness for brain aneurysm development and prevention.
Mhm.
And then that led me to have the freedom to, I bought a moving truck and I converted it into a tiny home. So I was on the road for like 500 days and just living off of the land. I had solar panels on it, which allowed me to charge everything that I needed. And it's like living the minimalistic lifestyle. And to be honest, there was no, that's the most peace I've ever felt, is just living on the road and just
Mhm.
waking up wherever I wanted to be and just parking wherever I can find a nice parking spot. Um, One of my favorite moments from that was like parking on the side of the road. This was in, I want to say, um, Cape Canaveral in Florida, and then seeing like a rocket launch. And it's like seeing a rocket launch from like the roof of my house because I was living in the truck. Um, or like waking up on South Beach in Miami, like literally on the beach, just, and then being able to see the sunrise from there. And then that led me to writing the kids book. I had the time and to explore that, and wrote the kids book, and was able to really define the type of storytelling that I want to push in, and that's representing, Filipino voices and voices of color, and giving them another medium that they can see themselves represented in. And then I had my podcast, which was amazing. And I was able to bring a whole bunch of friends that I've worked with throughout different industries, and was able to highlight the importance of like mental health and people's journeys into their entrepreneurship or their artistry. Um and then yeah, just being able to focus time and energy into different things. And then that led me into stand up, and getting laughs from people is the most immediate form of validation that you are a good writer and you have this presence that people listen to. And so, yeah, seeing where that goes, because it's all still very new to me, but at the same time, I seem to be leaving an impact, which I want to pursue.
Mm. And just witnessing you, there is so much to celebrate. And what, but like you mentioned, it's like you are living this feature film, and you're the main character of Xavi de Guzman. And it's like all these different chapters, these different eras, this character development is just unfolding, and it's a joy to witness. So my next question is, I guess, where do you get the inspiration, and what gives you the courage to take action on it?
Mm. Um, I think with where I get that inspiration from, I'm not too sure if you've explored it or if you have the same sentiment. But I feel like there is this divine, and everybody has access to this divine. And if you've ever had a situation where you had an idea and then you didn't act on it, and then a few days later, a week later, somebody else shares that same sentiment, you're like, I was just thinking that. But then, and then it's so much more, I guess, prevalent in your thoughts because you literally had that thought, but you just never acted on it. And I've experienced that, especially in film as well, where it's like somebody would say an idea, and then a few years later, all of a sudden it would be on TV. And everybody has this access to this divine, and it's whoever's willing to just sit down and write down the idea that you had, because those ideas are fleeting itself. So that's pretty much what kind of drove that, where I just started writing these ideas down, and then I'd revisit it and just be like, oh yeah, I did think of this. And then all of a sudden just start to try to flush it out and then build from there. But it all starts with that, where when inspiration hits, don't just, you know, laugh it off or just shrug it off. Just be intentional with it and act on it. Because yeah, same thing happened like with my dad when I was growing up. I remember where when I was like playing sports, my dad built this rack to like hold my equipment, and it was so ingenious, and I just laughed it off. And like I wouldn't even show it to like my friends when they'd come over. I'd like hide it because it just looked so funny. And then a few years later I see that Canadian Tire, and it's like, man, my dad was on something.
Oh yeah, no, I definitely yeah resonate with you when you say the divine. You know, whether it's divine, source, spirit, God, the information field, intellectual intelligence, like it's out there,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Or even that Elizabeth Gilbert book, The Big Magic, she talks about that a
Yeah,
lot too. Um, so with your book, let's focus on that.
yeah.
Tell me the inspiration. Tell me, oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Tell me the story behind that. So you said you were on the road, you had the time, space, capacity, the inspiration to write, to share. Let's continue and elaborate on that part.
Yeah. A little, I don't know if I should say this on your podcast or not, but I'll partake in a little bit of weed every now and then. And whenever you smoke, if you're familiar with it, you get the thing called the munchies. And whenever I'd have friends over and stuff, and we'd partake, munchies would be a thing, but I would always have fruit.
Mm.
And like my friends would call me out on it. It's like I don't usually eat this healthy when I smoke. And it's like these are the snacks that I enjoy as well. And so that's kind of what sparked that dialogue, was the fact that I had snacks that friends would only find at home at like their parents. And it was just fresh fruit. And like sometimes I'd peel it for them. And it's just that act of peeling it, that it's that service, that act of service that people don't really consider. And it just got me to thinking about how when I was younger, my parents, specifically my mom too, like she would always be sitting at the dinner table, and especially after we'd finish eating, she would just be sitting there peeling some oranges or peeling some stuff for us to have afterwards. And I didn't think much of it. And it's like, but then it was when I started doing that act for my friends now, and then they brought it up. And then it's like, okay, I guess not everybody does this. Because even a lot of friends that I have, like, unfortunately, they'll go buy, packaged fruit, which when I go to the grocery store, I see that and I'm like, who the hell buys these things? Why don't you just buy the fruit and cut it yourself? It's cheaper.
Mhm.
And so just that act of the preparation of something that people are about to eat. And I love cooking too. So I guess that's another reason why I don't think twice of it, because like there, yes, I'm preparing food for you, but there's no actual like process to it. I'm just taking the peel off of it.
Mhm.
Where if I really like you, if you're a friend, I will cook for you. Like my buddy came
Mhm.
over the other day and we were just chatting, and I was just like, yo, do you want an omelet? Because I was just craving an omelet. And then like I made an omelet. I cracked 3 eggs. I chefed up a nice asparagus omelet, and then put
Mhm.
some chili in it, seasoned it up, and it's like that effort of wanting to nourish somebody
Mhm.
with good food is, I guess, something that a lot of people don't do for each other, where it's like, yeah, just a bag of chips. Or so with that, spending time with that thought, um, realizing fruit as well being very specific to being islanders, where that's one thing too that I want to pass down, where that simple gesture of peeling fruit is so much more than just it being fruit, but it also then connects to your heritage. And in this world of diversity, being able to understand that even what you consume has, you know, cultural significance, making people notice that and just be aware of it can also lend to that shift in this global consciousness.
Mm. Yes, thank you for sharing that. And yeah, no, everything goes on this podcast. So it's all welcomed and you are welcomed as you are. Um, you mentioned at the beginning a few challenges that you were going through. I'm sorry to hear about the separation of the engagement, but like, what was the biggest challenge that you've had to go through in your journey so far?
My biggest challenge, I'd say, and in the question sheet too that you sent over, one of your questions were, who's your biggest cheerleader? And it breaks my heart that I have to second guess, is my like my family, are they my biggest cheerleaders? Because at first, and I think this is also just the programming that they had growing up, where it's not an option to go into the arts full time. And so that would, I would say, was the biggest hurdle, was like my family always encouraging me to do something else, to have a backup plan. And now they're definitely my biggest cheerleaders. Um, they understand the industry. They understand when I'm on set, what it means when I say I'm busy and I genuinely mean it. This isn't just me trying to get out of, family obligations. But like back then, that was the hardest thing, because not many people were cheering for you. And there was even a point where um, one of my first agents that I had going into acting, like he didn't believe in me. And that's what lent to me going out to the West Coast, because I was like, okay, if my family doesn't believe in me at this point where I'm at, hopefully my agent does, because he's the one that's sending me out to these auditions. And if he doesn't believe in me, then he's not going to send me out to things. And so he didn't believe in me. He told me that I didn't have the it factor, had that conversation. And that broke me, because it felt like I had nobody in my corner now. And so I really had to just second guess and question and really be introspective about it. It's like, do I have what it takes to be in this industry? And luckily enough, I stayed in it. Um, and then made the choice to move out to the West Coast, and hopefully, just because even remember going out there, I was like, all right, this is the last straw. This is make or break. If nothing happens, then I'm done. I'll just head back home with my head down, and I'll just bite the bullet and just go into a nine to five job, and I'd be happy knowing that I tried, and then went out, and then just everything aligned, and yeah, one thing led to a next, and I won some pretty neat projects.
Yes, and ah, your resilience and the persistence to stay in the industry
Mm,
is definitely something that takes courage. So thank you for doing that and
yeah.
leading by example. Um, what is the most important skill you developed through this journey, through the being in the entertainment industry?
Mm. Was that one of the questions? That is a great question.
Mm.
What's an important skill? Being confident that you have a voice, learning to find that confidence within your own voice. I think that's one of the important skills, because, and I'm experiencing this through comedy as well, where multiple comedians can have the same joke, But then if you're trying to tell it like somebody else, it's not really going to land, where you have to know your style, you have to know your story and how to tell it, that people can relate not only just to the topic, but then to the person that's telling it. Like I believe that the messenger is just as important as the message when it comes to trying to get an idea across. And so luckily through acting, that's kind of, I'd even say before that, because I've been on the stage before I started acting, where I've hosted shows, I've hosted parties, I've hosted events in front of like tens of thousands of people. And so being able to command a space just with a microphone really lends to knowing your voice and knowing how to speak to people. Um, because I think that's my thing. That's my art, is storytelling. So whenever, like, that was always a big thing too, where it's like, oh, what do you love about acting? And it's that cliche thing. And I didn't like saying it because everybody said it, where it's like, oh, I like telling stories, because I didn't really understand it. But
Mhm.
then through that understanding, there's so many different mediums of storytelling. And I seem to find my niche in each one, where it's like I'm telling stories when I'm doing stand-up comedy, I'm telling a story when I wrote the book, I'm telling a story when I'm acting and telling someone else's story. And that's I think one big thing is, yeah, just one big skill is figuring out your voice and just being confident with that.
Mm. Yes, and with your different art that's out there, you know, yes, what is the big vision? What,
Hmm.
where, who do you see yourself becoming, evolving to in this lifetime?
Mm, everything that I want to do, I kind of want to push back towards the charity.
Mhm.
And I think that's what lends to a successful artist, is to not just focus on the art, but to just let the art be the hobby and then lend it to some kind of source that gives back. And that's the thing that I want to give back, is I want the charity to grow and to really impact the world, um, and hopefully make a difference in medicine, in the medical field, and hopefully that lends to a better world where it's one less illness that we have to worry about to such degree, where the focus of it is brain aneurysm development and prevention, where there's some charities out there that are doing amazing things, but then they focus on the rehabilitation of it versus the prevention of it. So it's like, how can we target it first, and then looking at things like heart attacks or stroke, or like even cancer, where there's a lot of public service announcements on how to identify a heart attack or a stroke, or what means can we do to try and prevent cancer from happening. Where that's the thing that I would like to see with brain aneurysms, is the awareness of it, and to find a way where it becomes more mainstream, that it can get diagnosed sooner than later. Because a lot of times when people think of brain aneurysms, they automatically assume the rupture, versus
Mhm.
it's a lot more common than people think, where 1 in 50 adults have an aneurysm.
Mhm.
And for that, like, an aneurysm, the by definition is just a weakness in a blood vessel. It has nothing to do with the rupture, where
Mhm.
the weakness would lend to the rupture. It would lend to other deficiencies, where people can go through their entire life without having an aneurysm rupture, but they'll have the aneurysm, but they wouldn't know it. And then there's so
Mm.
many contributing factors that lend to how people can get an aneurysm, where you can be born with it, to as simple as when you were in grade 5 and a soccer ball hit your head.
Mm.
And it's so, finding ways, like, one of the examples that I use is President Joe Biden. He was diagnosed with a brain aneurysm because he had specialists looking for it specifically. Because there's so many people who have gone in for an MRI and for a CAT scan for other reasons, but because they're not looking for aneurysms or weakness in blood vessels, because there's so many little blood vessels that it would take so long to just sit down and for specialists to look through a scan specifically for aneurysms. But then if we can make it more mainstream, then there would be a process that would get involved on how it would be more detectable. And so with that, when you have one, then the cost on top of the surgery to fix it is also another exorbitant fee, where if we can drop that and make that something more accessible for people who can't afford it right now, then that would also lend to a longer lifespan for the populace.
Witnessing you, you're very passionate about this.
Hmm.
And was there someone in your life? Was there an experience that has led you to this passion, this
Yeah.
big vision to support and make an impact?
One of my friends growing up passed away October 2013, and he was 25 at the time. And I always thought brain aneurysms, anything that dealt with aneurysms, were for old people. So you wouldn't think it's like an issue that you would have to face as a young adult. Um, Even with that term itself, like young adult, we don't quite know when we transition from teenager to young adult. And so I learned that it's only growing. The numbers are only growing within the younger generations now as well. Um, and the doctor's explanation of, well, it can happen to anybody, just didn't really sit well with me. And so that's the thing. And then I learned that there's not a lot of funding that goes into this specific field of medical research, and which is why that is the sufficient answer, is it can happen to anybody. Where, as unfortunate as that is, I'm sure there's also a way that it can also not happen to anybody. So hoping that my efforts can lend to this being more something that you can just walk into when you go in for a checkup. Just like, hey doc, it's my I've turned 30, I've turned 25. Like how when men go and get their prostate typically around 40, right? Where it's just like, hey, on top of this thing, can I also check if, you know, my blood vessels are good, stuff like that. So stuff that lends to just it being able to be more accessible is the hope.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing story. And like even seeing that, you know, you're this founder of this charity, and that, you know, I'm like, there has to be a story behind it. So thank you for sharing that about your friend. Oh, what does move with love mean to you?
Move with love. I think that emotion itself is, it allows you to be present. So while you're moving, to just move with mindfulness and move with awareness in the space that you're in, um, lends to just a much more open and accepting mindset while you're in whatever position you're in. Even in an instance of arguing with your partner, where if you just remind yourself and keep love within it, then that can allow you to then help see their perspective on things, and not just to go in to this conversation with blinders on and things like that. So moving with love allows that. And even with acting, like I've always enforced the rule whenever you're analyzing a scene to keep love in the scene. And because then that allows you, then even whatever relationship you have with your scene partner, whether it be a parent or a partner or a friend, where if you just remember to keep love in it, and even if it's just love for yourself in that scene, then that allows you then to, yeah, still be present within that scene. And um have discoveries that revolve around how you feel about the other person and how you feel about yourself.
Thank you. For those who are listening and who may, have this grand idea, whether it's write a book, whether it's move to a new country, whether it's take a leap, what advice would you give them?
Ooh, move with love. It's you really just have to try it. And I think Jim Carrey has that quote where he got it based off of like the experience that he had with his dad, where you can fail at something that you don't like, so why not try something that you do? Um, because what's the worst that can happen? Because even through financial investments, where it's like the worst that can happen is you'll be in debt. But then it's like, it's all about the recovery, the bounce back from it, where whatever happens, whatever setback happens, sometimes then you just have to remind yourself that you can bounce back, that you are capable of trying again. So it's like not just being afraid of, oh, well, what if I fail? It's like, okay, cool. What if you fail? Then you just try again. But then also on the other side of things, it's what if you succeed? What if it turns out to be fruitful? And I think that's one magical thing about life is just wherever you put your energy towards, you'll always be fulfilled.
Mm-hmm. It's like that we're not afraid of our darkness. We are actually afraid of our greatest light.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, and you're shining bright, my dear, like witnessing you. And I'm so glad you said yes to this interview
Of
for this
course.
co-creation on the Move with Love podcast. Where can our listeners and our viewers find you?
Um, I guess the easiest link would be my Instagram, at X de Guz. And then I'd also encourage people to check out www.letsplayon.org to be a
Mhm.
part of the foundation and to help be in, the growth and hopefully be a part of when the foundation does great things. Um, yeah, I think those are the two main things. And then you can access my book through the Instagram page at Peeled Fruit Book. And if you have anybody that knows or has kids or nieces or nephews and for people of color as well, if they're looking for a little representation, check that book out. Yeah.
Thank you. What a deep convo. We went on a ride in the last half hour and a bit. So until next time, yeah, you could follow him. I'll put all the links in the show notes and YouTube notes. But until next time, thank you for sharing your magic with me and your medicine with the audience members. And let's share the message. Let's adapt the mindset. Let's move with love together. Thank you.
Thank you.